Hello everyone, this is Mel from Sneakers Corner speaking to you again. This is a lastminute.com video. I got an email from one of our subscribers that mentioned about the following, and you'll forgive me with any sort of Greek names and stuff like that, or even any foreign names. I struggle with pronunciation, but I'll have a go. Elagabal. So we're going to be focusing on the origins of the Black Stone. So this is one possible explanation for where the whole cult of the Black Stone came from. I think it's a very realistic one. On the channel so far, we looked at John of Damascus' explanation prior to this, and his explanation was that there was a cult to Aphrodite. And he mentioned that there was the head of Aphrodite with carvings on it and so on. And this is where it all came from. Now, this here would appear to be a different explanation. I'm presuming it's not the same common idea. But what's interesting is where it's coming from. It's not coming from the Hijaz. It's coming from way up north. It's a common theme on the channel. Everything seems to be coming from up north. I haven't seen much evidence for the Islamic traditions account for anything. Every time we scratch the surface, again and again, history contradicts the Islamic tradition. There are people like Ali Dawa that come on the channel and they argue with material, but they haven't really come up with any alternative explanation to what I'm giving. Some people come on and they just say, well, we're misinterpreting the facts and things like that. But it's interesting, no matter what we look at, and this is not through manipulation, it's just a fact of reality that every time we look at some piece of evidence, it always seems to point way up north. So this is a case in point. Now, you'll see here, there's an image. This is on a blog post. I'm going to share the link with you later after the live stream is over, so you can have a look at the blog post. It's a very good one. It's from 2015. And yeah, so you see here the image of a coin. Elagabal, I'll try that again. Elagabalus aureus sol invictus. Now, what's of interest in particular is the fact that we have a group of horses here, and what they're carrying is a large stone, which is referred to as a black stone in the historical record. That's interesting. So it's depicted as being so large that it needs a group of horses to carry it. So that's interesting. Obviously, that doesn't match with what we have in the kaaba, but there is a story that the original black stone was broken up. Now, what is actually currently in the kaaba, anyone knows. For all we know, it could be anything that's there. But for what it's worth, it's a cult towards the black stone in the kaaba. We'll leave aside the questions of theology and why they would have a cult towards a rock, which sounds to me very much like a pagan action, a pagan ritual. Why would you have that in a monotheistic religion? There's obviously a strong history behind this black stone for it to be so strong that the Judeo-Christian heritage, which Islam claims to draw from, didn't seem to be strong enough to get rid of that pagan ritual. Not to say that all Muslims practice the ritual of visiting this black stone and kissing it and fondling it and all the rest of it. There are some Muslims who obviously view this as a weird and pagan custom that they don't want to take part in. Some Muslims have defended it and said that they have reinterpreted it and given it a new meaning. but it's hard to get away from its pagan origins. But in any case, this is one possible explanation to its origin, and it's in terms of the details, because it obviously, this particular black stone had such a significant place in history. It was revered by the Romans, very important to the Syrians. It would make sense for this to be the origin of the black stone, because big effects need big causes, and this would be the big cause to lead to a rock cult which seems to have very strong roots in the history of that people. And the location that's of importance is Emesa. Now, where is Emesa? Emesa is a location which would be modern day Homs, but it's essentially, if you were to look at a map of Damascus and you were to travel, say, northeastwards from Damascus, that's where it's located. If you were to go to Palmyra and head westwards, you would also get to Emesa. So if you imagine, go northeast from Damascus, go west from Palmyra, and where the two lines meet, there's Emesa. So significant location. If we think about what we spoke about up to now in terms of northern Iraq and Iyas, Ibn Kapisa and so on, we know that northern Iraq would be east of Emesa, not a million miles away, across the desert. So it's, again, up there in the north. So another link there. Emesa then also would be southwest of Edessa, which we've mentioned a few times. It is southwest of where Abraham came from, not a million miles away from there. If you about judging from the map, it looks about 200 miles. Maybe I might be wrong with the figures, but roughly about that sort of distance. So the area of Haran and Edessa, what I believe was Edessa is the original Ur of the Chaldees. So that's a significant location, first off. So it fits in with the overall schema that we've been looking at. And if this is the candidate for the black stone, it definitely supports the idea that, again, that Islam began way up north and didn't begin way down in the Hijaz. There's so little to support the fairy tale of Hijaz. We talk about the song, "The Fairy Tale of New York." But this is the fairy tale of the Hijaz and of Mecca down in the Hijaz. But in any case, let's get straight into it then. So the reverse of the imperial coin depicts horses pulling a wagon on which there is the sacred black stone from the temple of god Elagabalus in Emesa, modern Homs in Syria. The stone was associated in Rome with the cult of Sol Invictus by Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius Augustus from the year 203 to 222. After his death, he is commonly known as Caesar Elagabalus. I'll see how difficult I have with pronunciation. After his death, he is commonly known as Caesar Elagabalus, according to his favorite god. The name is the Latinized form of the Syrian Ilaha Gabal, which derives from Ilah, God, and Gebal, mountain. Compare this with Arabic, which is Jabal, resulting in the god of the mountain. Now, if my memory serves me right, the word for mountain, funny enough, in the Quran is an Aramaic word. I've forgotten it, but the correct Arabic term for mountain is Jabal. But there is a surah in the Quran which uses not the Arabic word for mountain, but a Syriac one. Okay. So it is called the god of the mountain. Okay. A Messene manifestation of the deity. Okay. So that's Caesar. What did I say? After his death, he's commonly known as Caesar Elagabus, according to this, his favorite god. Okay. Now, the post goes on. An excellent Wikipedia article tells about this stone and the cult of Elagabalus. The cult statue was brought to Rome by the Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius, who before his accession was the hereditary high priest at Emesa, and is commonly called Elagabalus after the deity. The Syrian deity was assimilated with the Roman sun god known as Sol Invictus, the undefeated sun. A temple called the Elagabali, let me try that again. Elagabalum, no, third time lucky. Elagabalium was built on the east face of the Palatine Hill to house the holy stone of the Emesa temple, a black conical meteorite. So if you imagine a large cone-shaped rock is what it was, okay? Herodian writes of that stone. This stone is worshipped as though it were sent from heaven. On it there are some small projecting pieces and markings that are pointed out, which the people would like to believe are a rough picture of the sun, because this is how they see them. Now, Herodian also relates that Elagabalus forced senators to watch while he danced around his deity's altar to the sound of drums and cymbals, and at each summer solstice celebrated a great festival popular with the masses because of food distributions, during which he placed the holy stone on a chariot adorned with gold and jewels, which he paraded through the city. 6-horse chariot carried the divinity. The horses, huge and flawlessly white, with expensive gold fittings and rich ornaments. No one held the reins and no one rode in the chariot. The vehicle was escorted as if the god himself were the charioteer. Elagabalus ran backward in front of the chariot, facing the god and holding the horse's reins. He made the whole journey in this reverse fashion, looking up into the face of his god. Okay. Now, Herodian's description strongly suggests that the Emesene cult was inspired by the Babylonian Akitu festival. Now, this is another depiction of it here. Bronze Uranius Antonius Elagabal stone, licensed in the public domain, and you can see here it's located in its temple. And one thing to bear in mind is obviously they're trying to depict the stone, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was so large it filled the whole temple. It could be that it's much smaller than as it's depicted, but just bear that in mind. The coin by Syrian ruler Uranius shows the Elagabal stone inside the Emesa temple. His identity is not completely clear to historians of 3rd century Rome. The emperor also tried to bring about a union of Roman and Syrian religion under the supremacy of his deity, which he placed even above Jupiter, and to which he assigned either Astarte, Minerva, or Urania, or some combination of the three as wife. Just want to say in passing, in terms of the importance of Syria, at one time, Antioch was the most important city in the Roman Empire. It's easy to forget. Obviously, Rome was important in Byzantium, but for a while, Antioch took over, and it's likely, I'd have to double check, but it's likely that it's during this period when they ruled from Antioch, that this Syrian god was raised to a high status in the Roman echelon. Okay. Now, the emperor also tried to bring about let me see if I've read that part. I think I may have, yes. Most sacred relics from the Roman religion transferred from their respective shrines to the Elagabalium, including the emblem of the Great Mother, the fire of Vesta, the Palladium, the shields of the Sali, and all that the Romans held sacred. He reportedly also declared that Jews, Samaritans, and Christians must transfer their rites to his temple so that it might include the mysteries of every form of worship. Okay, so that's the syncretist element, which is, I believe, the title there, syncretism. What's interesting, in Islam, you also find the same sort of syncretism that tries to put everything under the one roof. Oh. 1996 study of the Elagabal stone by Pierre Bellemare was published in SAO NASA Astrophysics Data System, titled Meteorite Sparks Occult. It identifies the stone as a meteorite. The exact origin of the Elagabalus stone remains obscure, but in historical times its destiny was closely intertwined with that of a dynasty of king priests who had been nomads, Bedouins of the desert. Does that sound familiar? Before settling down in Emesa to erect a shire to Elagabalus. Eventually the cult became famous and popular, so much that Elagabalus ended up being the chief deity of the Roman Empire under the title Deus Invictus Sol Elagabus, albeit for a short period of time between AD 218 and 222. So for a short spell, it was hugely important, but in Syria, I'm sure its importance never fully waned. Because of its apparently huge size, the meteorite would be of great interest to modern astronomers, but it is possible that 6 horses shown in the golden coin were needed to carry not only the stone, but the structures, emphasizing its holiness. Similarly, the stone shown in the Uranus coin is hardly in scale with the temple depicted, but rather a detailed image of how it looked. Huge meteorites do not usually survive intact in Earth's atmosphere and after the impact on Earth, but the largest known stone from the sky, the Hubba meteorite in Namibia, is a single piece and weighs an estimated 60 tons. In comparison of size, the black stone in Mecca, Al-Hajar al-Aswad, is 28 centimeters wide and 38 centimeters high, so relatively small, but tradition says it got broken up, so that might explain it. What happened to the stone? Life of Elagabalus in the Augustan history of uncertain date, possibly the 4th century, tells that after the murder of the emperor in 222, his religious edicts were reversed and the cult of Elagabalus returned to Emesa. Now, what's interesting here is this is one of those pivot moments in history. What might have happened if instead of returning it, they threw it into the sea, or they just destroyed it? You know, it's one of those turning points of history. But anyway, it was returned to Syria. It is possible, as P.M. Bellemare suggests, that the stone was broken by Byzantine Christians, but this is speculation in the lack of any historical or archaeological evidence about the later fate of the black stone. So Bellemare says, as for the black stone, it was quietly shipped back to Syria and reinstated in the temple of Emesa, and it was probably smashed to pieces when the temple was converted to a Christian church sometime in the 4th century. The site, now occupied by a mosque, has never been excavated. All that remains of the mysterious black stone are ancient texts of a collection of iconographic documents, mostly coins. It might have been smashed into pieces, or sensing the danger, priests of Elagabalus could have moved it somewhere to safety before Christians took over the ancient holy site of the temple. And just on that, I'll just bring back the picture of the coin. It's possible that where they might have brought the stone might have been to Petra, and then from there, at a later stage, it might have been brought down to the Hijaz, hence the whole story. So I see there's a few of you in the house. I will just go through messages. Hello to, let me see who I haven't spoken to yet. Hello to Falcon Force, to Stefan, to Forestry. Hello to Tony Holly. So last minute, are you sure? Tony says, yeah. So Stefan says, my name is Greek from Stephanos, meaning crown, from Olympic Games, but I'm from Serbia. All right, okay. I asked earlier where Stefan was from. I have been in Serbia a few times. I love the country. I love the people. I would suggest that everyone should go on holidays at some stage to Serbia. They are the nicest people, no doubt, in the world. I once sat outside someone's house in a small little town in Serbia once on a cycle trip there, and a girl in the house came out and opened the gates for me and called me in to have dinner with the family. And they proceeded to give me a bottle of beer, and they treated me like a king. Amazing. That's the Serbian people, wonderful people. So hello to Marek. Hello to Steve. Hello to Repent. Blessings upon all your works, SC. God bless. Thank you very much. Forestry. Everyone watching, smash the like button. Thank you very much. HA. Hello there. Irritating comment, who never leaves an irritating comment. You really need to live up to the name. They give some explanation, but most explanations have no basis. Yeah, I think you're referring to the Islamic tradition. Hello to Jojo. Jojo's saying that the Eucharist is pagan too. Well, if you believe, as those Christians who believe that the Word became flesh, that God entered the world, and that Jesus becomes present in the form of bread, which is just the what's referred to as merely the appearance of bread. It's no different than forming any close relationship with God. If God is everywhere, there's no problem with God being within you. And so therefore I don't see a problem with it, as long as you have to distinguish. It's really about theology. So I'm going off on a tangent, but I suppose it's an important point. It's all about theology, really. If I were to pick up a piece of bread, just a random piece of bread, and say this is God, then that would be incorrect. As long as there is a distinction, and there's and if you believe, first of all, it starts with, if you believe Jesus is God, both human and God, well, then there's no problem. But if you just say a random object of nature and say this is God, then you're committing adultery. There is a distinction in the theology. I'm not a theologian, but that's my go at it. Now, let me just show a couple of points here. So, betulas are sacred stones that were supposedly endowed with life. These objects of worship were meteorites which were dedicated to the gods or revered as symbols of the gods themselves. Okay, that's a good point there. Jojo says meteorites brought blocks of life on Earth. Not sure what you mean there. But got the general gist of it. Is a Mesa Homs in Syria? Yep, so I believe. Right, I might have just answered that question there. No. Ian says, good evening to you, Mel. God bless you dearly with your wonderful work together with your teams. Thank you very much. I'm trying to figure out where that name comes from. Would it be somewhere in Asia? At a guess, I'm going to say Korea. So if I'm right, just let me know. Right. Stefan says meteor was probably carved, or they could also chain rocks and statues of gold so they would not escape, possibly. No. Quran Hubbard. What's that? I've always been dubious of that claim. How could life or organic material survive space and the heat of entry into our atmosphere? Oh, I see what. Yeah, you're talking about that connection of the idea of life coming from other parts of the universe, hitchhiking a ride on a meteorite and so on. Hello to Dragona, who says shalom, everyone. Hello to Reverend Brian. Thank you very much for attending. Hello to Alika. Hello to, let me see who else. There's a few there from Dragona. Hello to Nadaverse. Just trying to say hello to everyone. Hello to Johnny Lazarus. Hello to Flutterstone. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA in the house. Very good. Let me see who else. I'm trying to get up to speed. Trinity Matrix, hello to you. Sudo. Lysander Spooner, who says, I agree about Serbia being a few times great country and people. Yeah, the best in the world, in my humble opinion. Jamie, hello there. And Morg, greetings, my friends. Flutterstone, I'll just share your comment here. If it's pagan, we Catholics have a pretty good excuse in as much as we are taking the words of Christ very literally, can't be faulted for that. Yeah. We're saying, we're doing what he said, basically. Not that it's not just exclusively Catholics, I should point out. No, let's see if I'm up to date. I think I've caught up with everyone. Hello to Trira, who claims that the Eucharist comes from, let me just share your point, comes from two ideas. Well, in the Gospels, it stems from the Passover ritual that is done by Jews that was given a fresh meaning by Jesus. That's the official account. You'd have to justify why you think that a Jewish rabbi would have gone as far away as the Buddhist religion and maybe Hinduism for a cause of his actions. But anyway, I'm kind of gone way off on a tangent there, but it's nice to see you all. I see Gisley. You're in the sneakers cult now. Very good. So thank you very much to the guy who emailed me. I better not say his name, just to keep his privacy. But a guy from Finland. I'm getting emails from all around the world with bits of information. Sometimes I have to beg, please stop sending me emails, because it's so time consuming trying to go through all the emails, because some of them are really long. But yeah, just if you send an email, just try and keep it brief. Try not to send too many of your research pieces, because I just don't have the time. I've already got enough on my plate trying to just do my own bit of research. And there's not enough time in the day, and I do want to have a life outside of this work as well. But I'm trying my best. But anyway, so that's the idea behind the black stone. I think I think this is a good contender for an explanation for the Black Stone. It's in the right location. We can see the origin of it. Because I can't imagine the Black Stone cult having just began in the 7th century or the 8th century. It must have had a precedent. It must have had a history behind it. And that would explain the strength of the tradition. The same as what we found with the tradition of Ramadan, which, as we saw in an earlier video, strongly comes from the area of Haran. And we could prove that with rock inscriptions from a site there in Haran. So this may be another piece of the jigsaw. So I'm just checking in on any a lot of different people here. I think you've attracted a number of non-theologians. I think so, Father Brown. Yeah. Yeah, I think if I ever get away from researching Islam's origins, I will definitely need to take a course in theology, just to kind of get a little bit more refinement in my understanding, but have enough a working knowledge, let's say, just to cover the essentials. But anyway, I hope that was helpful. I will leave the link to that blog post, and thank you very much to the Finnish guy who sent me the email with that information. I know that Jay Smith is going to be doing a video in the future about the origins of the Black Stone, and I believe they are doing extensive research into that. So you will find a lot more information given on that one. I don't know how this Black Stone fits in with the Chinese sources. There's no indication here in the information of any particular significant carvings or writings on it. It's hard to know how much credulity to give to the Chinese sources, because things get mixed up over time. So for what it's worth, that's as far as I have got in terms of the Black Stone at the minute. We'll probably come back to it in due course. I did think I had been given a good lead earlier on today, which was to do with the question of who was the spirit and the line man, which I've said, I believe it's Khosrow. There was an email sent to me which gave an epithet for Khosrow, which was the immortal soul, and it also even had part of the word meant line, and that sounded like a perfect match, except it was the wrong Khosrow. It was Khosrow the first instead of Khosrow the second. So that's a shame. It didn't work. But that's the trial and error of research. But that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, and talk to you very soon. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, this is Mel here from Sneakers Corner. We're all familiar by now with the Abbasid-sponsored myth that we have come to know as the Southern Islamic Narrative, or SIN. The Tayaye had the beginnings of another kind of myth 50 years after Khosrow appointed Iyas to be the king of Mesopotamia in 602. The land that became known as Tashkistan, the land of the Tayaye. The Chinese source, Zhiyu Tangshu, included a record from the Tayaye's envoy in 651, in other words, about 50 years after Iyas was appointed, which seems mostly historical, except for one small bit that seems like an early myth. Quote, "There is also a black stone with text carved on it. You will become the king if you read and do what the carved text on the black stone tells you." End quote. You will become the king if you read. Naturally enough, illiterate leaders don't generally become kings. Sorry, Muhammad. Could this be a reference to the sacred black stone of Emesa, called literally the god of the mountain, Ilaha Gabal, or in Latin, Elagabalus? In its favour is the implication that this black stone is associated with a mountain, and that it is to be found in one of 3 caves. However, against this conclusion is the description of the black stone in Herodian Roman History, Volume 3, which says that on it are markings that are pointed out which the people would like to believe are a rough picture of the sun, because this is how they see them. End quote. This is a long way short of the kind of carved instructions which the Chinese source says the reader must, quote, do what the carved text on the black stone tells you, end quote. It should be clear from the description of the black stone in the Herodian Roman history that the carvings were unclear and looked vaguely like the sun, or as it says, a rough picture of the sun. I don't think this source is really talking about a real black stone in a cave somewhere, but it is a foundation myth that harks back to a much earlier black stone which is tied to the earlier noble Babylonian period, which the Tayaye at that time sought to emulate. There is a much more ancient and historically significant stone, a stone stela which this mythical element is alluding to. It is the stela that is inscribed with the Code of Hammurabi, circa 776 BC. I will now read from Yuval Noah Harari's book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Before I do so, I just want to point out I don't necessarily agree with his positivist approach to human culture that dismisses claims to moral truths as anchored on the quicksand of human myths without any objective reality, but his description of the stela is nonetheless worthwhile considering. So I begin by reading from page 117 of his book. He says, all these cooperation networks from the cities of ancient Mesopotamia to the Qing and Roman empires were imagined orders. The social norms that sustained them were based neither on ingrained instincts nor on personal acquaintances, but rather on belief in shared myths. How can myths sustain entire empires? We have already discussed one such example, Pujo. Now let's examine 2 of the best-known myths of history. The Code of Hammurabi of 1776 BC, which served as a cooperation manual for hundreds of thousands of ancient Babylonians, and the American Declaration of Independence of AD 1776, which today still serves as a cooperation manual for hundreds of millions of modern Americans. In 1776 BC, Babylon was the world's biggest city. For those of you who are not familiar with what I mean by Babylon, Babylon is an ancient city about halfway down Iraq. It's to be found in the southern part of Mesopotamia, essentially. And in terms of places that we have mentioned on the channel, it is quite close to Hira. So that gives you an idea of its significance. So just back to the text. In 1776 BC, Babylon was the world's biggest city. The Babylonian Empire was probably the world's largest, with more than 1 million subjects. It ruled most of Mesopotamia, including the bulk of modern Iraq, and parts of present-day Syria and Iran. The Babylonian king most famous today is Hammurabi. His fame is due primarily to the text that bears his name, the Code of Hammurabi. This was a collection of laws and judicial decisions whose aim was to present Hammurabi as a role model of a just king, serve as a basis for a more uniform legal system across the Babylonian Empire, and teach future generations what justice is and how a just king acts. Future generations took notice. The intellectual and bureaucratic elite of ancient Mesopotamia canonized the text, and apprentice scribes continued to copy it long after Hammurabi died and his empire lay in ruins. Hammurabi's code is therefore a good source for understanding the ancient Mesopotamians' ideal of social order. The text begins by saying that the gods Anu, Enlil, and Marduk, the leading deities of the Mesopotamian pantheon, appointed Hammurabi to make justice prevail in the land, to abolish the wicked and the evil, and to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. It then lists about 300 judgments given in the set formula. If such and such a thing happens, such is the judgment. For example, judgments 196 to 9 and 209 to 14 read, 196. If a superior man should blind the eye of another superior man, they shall blind his eye. 197. If he should break the bone of another superior man, they shall break his bone. 198. If he should blind the eye of a commoner, or break the bone of a commoner, he shall weigh and deliver 60 shekels of silver. 199. If he should blind the eye of a slave of a superior man, or break the bone of a slave of a superior man, he shall weigh and deliver 1/2 of the slave's value in silver. 209. If a superior man strikes a woman of superior class and thereby causes her to miscarry her fetus, he shall weigh and deliver 10 shekels of silver for her fetus. 210. If that woman should die, they shall kill his daughter. 211. If he should cause a woman of commoner class to miscarry her fetus by the beating, he shall weigh and deliver 5 shekels of silver. 212. If that woman should die, he shall weigh and deliver 30 shekels of silver. 213. If he strikes a slave woman of a superior man and thereby causes her to miscarry her fetus, he shall weigh and deliver 2 shekels of silver. 214. If that slave woman should die, he shall weigh and deliver 20 shekels of silver. After listing his judgments, Hammurabi again declares that, quote, "These are the just decisions which Hammurabi, the able king, has established and thereby has directed the land along the course of truth and the correct way of life. I am Hammurabi, noble king. I have not been careless or negligent towards humankind, granted to my care by the god Enlil, and with whose shepherding the god Marduk charged me." Hammurabi's code asserts that Babylonian social order is rooted in universal and eternal principles of justice dictated by the gods. The principle of hierarchy is of paramount importance. According to the code, people are divided into 2 genders and 3 classes: superior people, commoners, and slaves. Members of each gender and class have different values. The life of a female commoner is worth 30 silver shekels, and that of a slave woman 20 silver shekels, whereas the eye of a male commoner is worth 60 silver shekels. The code also establishes a strict hierarchy within families, according to which children are not independent persons, but rather the property of their parents. Hence, if one superior man kills the daughter of another superior man, the killer's daughter is executed in punishment. To us, it may seem strange that the killer remains unharmed, whereas his innocent daughter is killed, but to Hammurabi and the Babylonians, this seemed perfectly just. Hammurabi's code was based on the premise that if the king's subjects all accepted their positions in the hierarchy and acted accordingly, the empire's million inhabitants would be able to cooperate effectively. Their society could then produce enough food for its members, distribute it efficiently, protect itself against its enemies, and expand its territory so as to acquire more wealth and better security. End quote. So just a quick aside, we can see here from this the huge importance of a myth for an empire. So we can see why Abd al-Malik would have been drawn to the idea of building his own myth, which would fit his need to create a framework by which his empire could maintain itself and expand. So back to the book. About 3,500 years after Hammurabi's death, the inhabitants of 13 British colonies in North America felt that the King of Great Britain was treating them unjustly. Their representatives gathered in the city of Philadelphia, and on the 4th of July 1776, the colonies declared their inhabitants were no longer subjects of the British Crown. Their Declaration of Independence proclaimed universal and eternal principles of justice, which, like those of Hammurabi, were inspired by divine power. However, the most important principle dictated by the American god was somewhat different from the principle dictated by the gods of Babylon. The American Declaration of Independence asserts that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like Hammurabi's code, the American founding document promises that if humans act according to its sacred principles, millions of them would be able to cooperate effectively, living safely and peacefully in a just and prosperous society. Like the Code of Hammurabi, the American Declaration of Independence was not just a document of its time and place, it was accepted by future generations as well. For more than 200 years, American school children have been copying and learning it by heart. The two texts present us with an obvious dilemma. Both the Code of Hammurabi and the American Declaration of Independence claim to outline universal and eternal principles of justice, but according to the Americans, all people are equal, whereas according to the Babylonians, people are decidedly unequal. The Americans would of course say they are right and that Hammurabi is wrong. Hammurabi naturally would retort that he is right and that the Americans are wrong. In fact, they are both wrong. Hammurabi and the American founding fathers alike imagined a reality governed by universal and immutable principles of justice, such as equality or hierarchy. Yet the only place where such universal principles exist is in the fertile imagination of sapiens, and in the myths they invent and tell one another. These principles have no objective reality. It is easy for us to accept that the division of people into superiors and commoners is a figment of the imagination, yet the idea that all humans are equal is also a myth. In what sense do all humans equal one another? Is there any objective reality outside the human imagination in which we are truly equal? Are all humans equal to one another biologically? Let us try to translate the most famous line of the American Declaration of Independence into biological terms. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. According to the science of biology, people were not created, they have evolved, and they certainly did not evolve to be equal. The idea of equality is inextricably intertwined with the idea of creation. The Americans got the idea of equality from Christianity, which argues that every person has a divinely created soul, and that all souls are equal before God. However, if we do not believe in the Christian myths about God, creation, and souls, what does it mean that all people are equal? Evolution is based on difference, not on equality. Every person carries a somewhat different genetic code and is exposed from birth to different environmental influences. This leads to the development of different qualities that carry with them different chances of survival. Created equal should therefore be translated into evolve differently. Just as people were never created, neither, according to the science of biology, is there a creator who endows them with anything. There is only a blind evolutionary process devoid of any purpose, leading to the birth of individuals. Endowed by their creator should be translated simply into born. Similarly, there are no such things as rights in biology. There are only organs, abilities, and characteristics. Birds fly not because they have a right to fly, but because they have wings. And it's not true that these organs, abilities, and characteristics are unalienable. Many of them undergo constant mutations and may well be completely lost over time. The ostrich is a bird that lost its ability to fly, so unalienable rights should be translated into mutable characteristics. And what are the characteristics that evolved in humans? Life? Certainly. But liberty? There's no such thing in biology. Just like equality, rights and limited liability companies. Liberty, too, is a political ideal rather than a biological phenomenon. From a purely biological viewpoint, there is little difference between the citizens of a republic and the subjects of a king. And what about happiness? So far, biological research has failed to come up with a clear definition of happiness or a way to measure it objectively. Most biological studies acknowledge only the existence of pleasure, which is more easily defined and measured. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should be translated into life and the pursuit of pleasure. So here is that line from the American Declaration of Independence translated into biological terms. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men evolve differently, that they are born with certain mutable characteristics, and that among these are life and the pursuit of pleasure. Advocates of equality and human rights may be outraged by this line of reasoning. The response is likely to be, we know that people are not equal biologically, but if we believe that we are all equal in essence, it will enable us to create a stable and prosperous society. I have no argument with that. This is exactly what I mean by imagined order. We believe in a particular order not because it is objectively true, but because believing in it enables us to cooperate effectively and forge a better society. Imagined orders are not evil conspiracies or useless mirages. Rather, they are the only way large numbers of humans can cooperate effectively. Bear in mind, though, that Hammurabi might have defended his principle of hierarchy using the same logic. I know that superiors, commoners, and slaves are not inherently different kinds of people, but if we believe that they are, it will enable us to create a stable and prosperous society. So I suppose the key thing is, if the Tayaye kingdom doesn't have a common religion like Christianity on which to found itself, then on what can they build a common set of values? It requires the creation of a myth. And of course, what would help that along much better would be to have a religion which comes with the myth. And so I think that goes a long way in not only explaining this reference to the black stone, but also in terms of explaining the origin of how Islam began. In conclusion, I'm inclined to think that the black stone in a cave with instructions on how to be a king is just a fanciful myth aimed at presenting the Tayaye as a noble kingdom built on the ancient foundations of Babylonian civilization. Was there really a stela in a cave? I think not. Ias was a cultured man, frequented by poets and well connected in the establishment. He had no need of a rock to tell him how to rule. Thank you for watching.